Global Affairs Analyst Nweke joins me via Skype from Belgium to discuss this. Good to have you join us, Nweke.
Thank you very much, Precious, for having me.
This is now, I mean, you see the just sort of outrage this is generating around the world, whether in the form of world leaders calling for a ceasefire or protesters calling for a ceasefire. But we also see that while there is a global outrage, the situation also seems to be deteriorating by the day. When you look at what is playing out right now between Israel and Palestine, what are the chances of a ceasefire anytime soon?
You need to have the crystal ball, Precious, to be able to predict when this crisis is going to de-escalate. Now, Israel has made it very clear that they do not have any appetite at this point to, ceasefire. Hamas has also vowed to, return fire with fire. And at a time when the United States of America was supposed to, play a role that should be considered as impartial, they have actually blocked a UN, a possible UN statement calling for a ceasefire. The reason they did that is actually not to box Israel up so that they are not able to make a statement to the effect of a ceasefire. So. It's been a very complicated situation right from 1948 when the State of Israel was founded, escalating more in 2014. But indeed, like you pointed out, that region of the world has never seen the conflict in the manner that it has played out in the last week.
It's interesting you mentioned that because, and I want to ask you why you think that this particular crisis is different from the others. What are the contributing factors?
Well, there are two contributing factors that point directly at domestic politics, both in Israel and in Palestine. But let me look at it first and foremost from the global, the international perspective. You played some clips that have been going on around the world with huge support for Palestine. Now, I think the world has come to a place where people are no longer able to entertain inequality, but also undemocratic control of Israel, of Palestine. I mean, in the two countries in conflict here, there is only one sovereign country, and that sovereign country is Israel, that forces its laws against the Palestinian. The concept of, two-state solution, is far from realization. And Israel has continued to act under, of course, the support, tacit support sometimes, but other times a very explicit support of the United States, that the world has seen that, inequality, that injustice, and I think people are crying out. If you also see what has been happening in the U.S. Congress, where the traditional allies of Israel are actually beginning to speak out, kickstarted by Senator Bernie Sanders. They are saying, no, we cannot turn our eyes anymore. And in the course of the program, if I have the leeway, I could talk about, the domestic factors on both sides of the conflict that is actually, fueling the escalation.
But let's also mention that about 3,000 rockets have also been fired into Israel, albeit the Palestinians have been at the receiving end in terms of casualty, numbers of casualty here. But I want to ask you about the possibility of a U.S. diplomacy. When you look at the fact that the U.S. envoy was sent to Israel some days ago, but it looks like there were no talks of a ceasefire. We also saw the UN Security Council had a meeting. There was really no concrete resolution reached. It does look like there is a limited U.S. diplomacy here.
Well, the United States has, traditionally been, a strong ally of Israel. It is considered rather politically incorrect in the United States to, utter any statements against Israel. Biden has continued in that line, even as he pledged, some time ago, that America is back on the international stage. I don't think those words have matched the rhetorics that they have used, on this occasion. However, I believe that there might be some light at the end of the tunnel when you consider that U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken only today, actually this morning, speaking from Sweden, while the protest next door to me here in Brussels was ongoing, that the bombardment of the tower building that houses international media, that the Israelis need to show proof that Hamas, materials and warfare activities were going on there that justified the bombing, because he hasn't seen anything. That is a turnaround. And so if they could continue along that line, holding Israel, accountable for the actions that they have committed against civilians, including journalists, your colleagues out there in Jerusalem, I think we might begin to see a turnaround. But they are far from, United States foreign policy is far away from that. We can only hope that there is a turnaround. Absolutely.
It does look like there is a limited option for conflict resolution. I mean, just so much to talk about, but we do have to leave it here. Global Affairs Analyst Collins Nweke, thanks for talking to us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.